here. So Our Bodies, Our Souls by Tziporah Heller, subtitled A Jewish Perspective on Feminine Spirituality. And she's touching on some of the points we've already sort of discussed. So forgive me if I'm a little bit repetitive. Also, I want to just ask again if we could just hold the questions for the end. I'm probably going to get to a lot less than I wanted to today. No, don't apologize. So I think maybe we'll just focus on, we'll see how far we get. Chapter 1 discusses feminism or masculism. We talked about last week about this difference between, in feminist thought, right? In philosophy, you have two approaches. One is the feminalism approach of valuing the women as women and their ways of seeing and knowing and discussing and relating to people, versus masculism, which is valuing the male way of doing it and aspiring to do that and having that as a goal for all women to achieve that sort of thing. So Tziporah Heller has very interesting points on this. She says, Judaism believes in wholeness, right? And that's the goal of the whole structure of the let's say halacha and mitzvos. We believe that there are contrasting aspects of selfhood, and that they're both viable, right? But so in other words, we believe in wholeness. We believe that there are different aspects of selfhood, right? And that being a woman doesn't mean you have to cut yourself off from the rest of the world. But what does it mean in Judaism to be fully in the world? What does it mean to be completely who I am? Okay, so according to feminists, it means the right to do what he's doing, right? And, the right of women to be like men. In religion, it means a woman should do the role of men. It means, in other words, that you, as a woman, have a right to be what I am as a man. But that's not really expressing yourself fully. It's not really fulfilling who you are. It's fulfilling who he is, right? That's not, she says, this is anti-feminist. The rights of a person to be who they fully are means a right to self-define and to be self-determined. And she gives an example. So in other words, not to be defined by someone else's definition of self. She gives an example of, I think, Natan Sharansky in prison. She says, when he finally came out of prison, they asked him what was it like to be. They said, what is it like for you finally to be free? And he said, I was always free. Because he had that self-definition. He didn't let anybody else's external, reality really enter his consciousness as to what he felt he was. And that was a tremendous level of self-empowerment, right? So people are happy. Isn't that? Think about it. I was always free. I'm in my head. I'm in my soul, in my mind. I'm who I am, and you can't take that away from me. It's very powerful.
It's like mind-body connection. I would think that a lot of people in prison probably have to take that on a little bit, or they would go crazy.
Right. Because otherwise, it's crushing. It's soul crushing to think that you're not able to do everything that you want to do. Right. Yeah. So she says, so what does it mean to be self-actualized? People are happiest when they're self-actualized. She says, if you look at, the animals, okay, fine, they don't have the aspect of free choice, but they do everything they can do. Birds fly, rabbits hop. That's what they do. They don't choose not to, and that's what they were created to do. Humans also tend to be happiest when we can do all that we're meant to do. Be all that you, remember that slogan, be all that you can be. And so a person, she says, who would choose to have no individual sexual identity is seen as having destroyed their ability to self-actualize, right? If you're going to say, well, I value myself for how I can be like the men, then you're really not self-actualizing. You're not really living who you are to the fullest. You're living the idea of it, but it's a wrong idea. She says self-actualization doesn't come exclusively through gender or sex, but partially. And again, the Torah view of women and gender is that there are distinct qualities for the purpose of distinct action, as we'll get into next week. So she says this means that the women should have the right to be women and acknowledge as women. So she's definitely in the feminist class of thought. Now, she says, she goes into, by the way, I'm also using not only this book, but she also gave a couple of lectures that I listened to online where she discusses this. She says, how did feminism come about? The truth of the matter is, feminism, modern feminism, was really a very logical outgrowth of society's the reality of society. How does she mean? So she says like this: imagine 200 years ago, right? You have John and Mary are living on a farm, because 200 years ago it was pre-industrial revolution. Let's say they're living on a farm. John is a farmer and he's working 14 hours a day in the fields, and Mary has 6 kids at home and she's taking care of the home and the kids, etc. And John comes in from the fields and he sits down at the table, and they're sitting at the table and they're eating. And John turns to Mary and says, "So, Mary, are you fulfilled? Are you self-actualized?" What would Mary say? What are you talking about, right? Because life at that point was about survival. Right. For all of human history, life was about survival, right? So it was, chopping wood for the fire, for heat, and milking the cows for milk, and tilling the farms, and making your own clothing, and everything was very different. There were challenges of survival that were just very different. Men worked to support the family, and the women basically raised the family, took care of the home, that sort of thing. Okay, now go forward, even if you want to go forward a little bit more into the Industrial Revolution, where John is working in a factory, or maybe he's choosing a profession, and Mary's still at home taking care of the kids. It would still be a silly question, right? We're surviving. We're working to make money. The man is working to make money and support his family, and Mary is raising the family in a very real way. Now, move up to the 1940s. All right, life is very different. Okay, for Mary, John is still out there. His life is not that different. Maybe he's not working 14 hours a day. Maybe he's working 10 or maybe even 8 hours a day. Maybe he has more choice of profession, right? So maybe he owns a little store, or maybe he's a lawyer or a teacher, or engineer, something like that. Maybe he does work in a factory if he's blue collar, but he's still basically, his life is still the same. His goal in life is to work and support the family, bring home the bacon, as it were, right? But Mary's life is a little different. She now has an icebox, so she doesn't have to, which means she doesn't have to go shopping every day. She has maybe an electric stove, so she doesn't have to bring coal up from the basement or buy firewood. She doesn't have to wait an hour till the stove heats up to cook or to bake, right? So her life is a little bit different. Maybe she has one of those hand crank washing machines. She doesn't go to the stream to beat her clothes on the rock. All right, so it's a little bit easier. Her workload is reduced, and her life is beginning to be a little easier. Okay. Moving ahead 10 more years, now she's got a washer dryer. So she doesn't have to hand crank anything. She's got a KitchenAid mixer. She doesn't have to beat egg whites like this, right? Or even like this. She has fewer children because now birth control is becoming popular. She doesn't have a whole brood of kids. She doesn't have to go, like we said, she doesn't have to go shopping every day. She doesn't even have to deal with the ice, the ice box, refilling the ice. She's got a refrigerator. So now she's got a lot more extra time. So what did they do with their extra time? Again, remember, John is still doing what he always was doing. And she is finding she has a lot more leisure time. So what do? They took up bridge or mahjong, right? They were the ladies who lunched, right? They went to have these girl lunches. So there was a technical liberation of her, but it left a void. What do I do with my life now? These are the questions that they started to ask. So you had in the 50s, you had this image developed of the happy homemaker, quote unquote, the happy homemaker. She was this woman, this wife, and if you think about like ads from that time period or commercials from that time period, you can envision it. This is a woman who has perfectly coiffed hair. She's in this, nice little poodle skirt, and she's in her sparkling kitchen, and she's bringing a roast out of the oven. Mm-hmm. That was the happy homemaker. Her goal was to have the shiniest floors and the moistest bundt cake. right? That was the happy homemaker. And that was the goal. That was like, what she aspired to, right? Very manicured, but they're not self-actualizing activities anymore. They're not even survival activities anymore, right? So you're creating a problem. In addition, at this time, you had people living in the suburbs rather than in the cities. What that meant was that people are separated from each other. So she's isolated in her home, so John is in the office and Mary is bored in the suburbs. Maybe on a little Valium because she's finding her nerves are a little, she's not, what's going on here? So by the 60s and 70s, you had these large numbers of women who had no idea what they should be doing with themselves. Okay, this is the vacuum the feminists came into. But so the problem is, if you're doing smaller and smaller meaningless tasks, it's no question you're going to start wondering, what am I doing with my life? So the feminists were rebelling against this image of the happy homemaker. You remember the movie Stepford Wives? Mm-hmm. So that was this sort of horror vision of the women becoming these literally these automatons in the suburbs. They all wore similar dresses and they go shopping, and this was a rebellion. It was a commentary rebelling against that image of the happy homemaker. Now, at the same time, what else was going on was that the secular world was becoming less spiritual, right? So whereas before, the mother was always the moral backbone of the family, and raising the kids with morals and values and religion, you now had less, that was becoming less important. So what's going on in the schools is there's this need to create a child, a graduate who can go out into the world and go on to college and gain status and money, position. That's important. So now geography and math is seen as more important than moral values. So therefore, the mother, who had always been the one instilling these values, becomes less important than the school teacher. The school teacher now she's got the real job, right? She's got the real job because she was teaching algebra, history, the quote unquote important subjects, rather than how to be honest, how to be a good person, not to lie, things like that. So the secular mother is really becomes unconnected from her family's spiritual foundation, right? Because now society's values are different. So therefore, now, this ideal, of course, was never the ideal of Jewish woman. Right, so in Jewish society, Shlomo HaMelech's poem, the Woman of Valor, the valor that we say every Friday night, the woman there, I keep coming back to that because that really describes womanhood in its idealized state. In its ideal state, we have a wise woman. She has business acumen. She is kind, compassionate. She delegates her work. She takes care of her servants. She has insight into how to raise her family. She deals with each person. If you remember, one of the things that it says is she deals with each person according to their needs. So she is, there's nowhere in our history or our law or anything that has to do with baking the moistest punt cake or making perfect hospital corners on bed sheets. We don't have, now, certainly, a nice house and a clean house, and that's all contributes to the end goal. But the end goal was never the perfect house, the clean kitchen, the best pot roast. We could delegate that work, and it's not an issue. It was a means to an end. But in the secular world, it became, in the 50s, 40s and 50s, it became the end in itself. Wow, I did my job. I have a perfect house. Now what? What does that mean? Right. So it also, again, if you think about 200 years ago, as opposed to Mary and John, you had, let's say, Zalman and Bela in the shtetl. They also never had this question of, am I self-fulfilled? But not for the same reasons. Not because their life was only about survival, but because they always had that foundation of Torah. They know what their goal was. Their goal was to live the life of a good Jew. And what does that mean? Doing mitzvahs, getting close to Hashem, doing good in the world, raising kids to pass on the Torah to the children. So they always had a sense of meaning in their life. Bela always had the sense of meaning. the purpose in the Jewish world, again, is mitzvos, and the secular world it became status and money. So again, and even you think about it, even in secular society, the woman used to be really acknowledged as the spiritual, moral backbone of the family, but as a result of the secularization of life, the lack of the spiritual development as a goal for children, so therefore the mother's role as the moral foundation, building a moral home, that sort of fell off. So therefore, again, it left this void. We never lost our goals. As a mother, my goal is not to make the prettiest cake, but to raise children who are going to pass on to the next generation, to raise good kids, to do mitzvos, etc., etc. So, but so now in the suburbs, what she does is not really necessary. It's not valued. There's no value in it because there's no money and there's no status in that. But what men have done and always done is bring in money. They have the status. They have the role that is envied, that is looked upon as respected and admired. So therefore, now come the feminists. And the feminists are right to say, the cake is not important. What he does is important. So maybe I should do what he's doing. And that's how you get to careerism as a goal of feminism. Instead of what we do and what should have been done is say, wait, women used to contribute something of value. Mothers, wives, homemakers. They contributed something that was more than just a bundt cake. But we've forgotten that. They didn't recognize this, but again, it's what we have not forgotten is that when we're keeping a clean home, the physical nurturing is important. Baking cookies with your kids is important, but it's in service to the end goal, which is raising, instilling mitzvahs, instilling a love of Hashem. As a goal, that is much more respectable than baking the bundt. So, okay, so then of course, cake is not important. They believed that the position that would fulfill them would be the career. And so, of course, now in the 70s and 80s, you had the career woman. Careerism was it. The image of the fulfilled woman now became the woman who has it all. She's got the family, and it's in my notes. Do you remember that commercial? That was, in this,
I can't sing.
in the 80s, there was a commercial.
Bacon,
Fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man. This was a commercial for, I think it was a perfume, Anjali.
Yes.
And the tagline was, what was the for the 24-hour woman. This was the ideal now, someone who does it all. It's impossible, really, when you think about it. What a burden. It's, that ideal is not, it's impossible to do that. But that was it, versus, you think about like television shows in the 50s and 60s, it really kind of reflected what was going on in society. Like you had Father Knows Best, right? And you had the Brady Bunch. And I don't know, maybe there are others, but those shows come to my mind. Where you had the father was now, the father figure was the one imparting the moral values, right? Father knows best, says it all. The wife was now the one who provided the emotional support and was making dinner, But even the Brady Bunch, you had, at the end of the show, remember Mr. Brady would always, okay, now what did we learn? What was the lesson that we learned?
He was later than the 50s.
It was 70s. It was 70s.
Yeah.
But you
like Leave It to Beaver. Or
Leave It to Beaver.
What other shows?
What about that My Three Sons or something?
My Three Sons didn't even have a mother.
Yeah, that's right.
There wasn't even a mother in there. That was the man and his
Maybe that
sons.
was 70s too.
No, that was earlier. I think that was 60s. That was earlier. But there, you had a very true, a true depiction of the wife, the mother, the wife, the role of the mother. Huh? What was
Dick
that?
Van Dyke Show.
The Dick Van Dyke Show.
With, what was her name?
Yeah, Mary.
Mary
Mary.
Tyler
Mary Tyler Moore, right?
Is that who it was?
Yeah.
She was all perfect in
Right.
her suits.
Yeah.
and her
Exactly.
little-
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, she's not the moral foundation of the family. He's the moral foundation of the family. You know, it's interesting, by the way, to contrast it to today's television shows. Since the '90s,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, you say that because it's horrifying.
It's
They've
horrifying.
turned the table so much that men are now the stupid, bumbling idiots, and the woman is the wise, and you know, it's yeah.
Mostly they're both.
Anyway, but that's the so okay. So again,
For sure,
huh?
for sure,
Yeah.
CEOs and people in business are bumbling idiots.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Business.
You know,
Right.
that-
Well,
that's the
they're
first
they're
thing
just
my
evil.
Dad noticed
They're just
in these
evil.
movies. I didn't even pick up on it.
Uh-huh.
Why do they always make that boss an idiot?
Right. So again, you know that was the goal, careerism. But it's, as I said, it's really an impossible goal. You can't do everything and do it well. You just can't. And in Judaism, this translated into, okay, the men's roles are the ones that are important. Again, because, you know, so it must indicate men's superior religious status, right? If a man can put on a tallis, that's what his job is. It must be better. However, mitzvos that relate to a woman taking challah must indicate women's inferiority. Okay, that's the feminist take. So that's I thought that was that's really sort of explains the whole phenomenon very nicely. We're going to stop here if that's all right.